Major support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Colonial Life, providing benefits to employees to help them protect their family, their finances, and their futures. And Sonoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
A decade now into this expanding economy, and no doubt with human nature, we get a sense of complacency, that things will always be as they've been the last decade or so. Layer on top of that people are starting to think and be distracted with summer activities, schools and recess, family trips. It would be fair to wonder if business activity might see a lull. Welcome again to the most widely watched source of Carolina business, policy, and public affairs. I'm Chris William. Thank you for supporting this dialogue. We start by taking a look at contemporary issues in the region, business, policy, and later one of the nation's oldest and certainly foremost recyclers and Fortune 500 companies. The Chief Executive Officer of Hartsville, South Carolina-based Sunoco, Rob Tiede, joins us.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Martin Marietta, a leading provider of natural resource-based building materials, providing the foundation upon which our communities improve and grow. Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association. Visit us at southcarolinablues.com. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Barings, a leading global asset management firm dedicated to meeting the evolving investment and capital needs of its clients. Learn more at barings.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Peter Brews, Ph.D., Dean of the Darla Moore School of Business, USC, Lee Roberts of SharpVue Capital, and special guest Rob Tiede, President and CEO of Sonoco.
Hello, welcome to our program. Peter, welcome back. Lee, good to have you here again. Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Good to be here.
Peter, let's start with you. So the Moore School, smack dab in the middle of South Carolina, in Columbia, obviously the capital city. South Carolina's in its short session, almost over, at least the formalized short session part of that. And education has been clear, front, center, job one. When the session is finally concluded and the gavel falls, do you feel like lawmakers will have made meaningful reform for K through 12 education?
I think there's a very high probability, Chris, that that's going to happen. I mean, I think it's tremendous what the governor has done. And as you watch what's developing in both the House and the Senate, I expect that by the end of the session we will have some significant reform. I will also add that it's really needed. And I mean, we at the university level, we require students to have capacity to be able to do the work that we want them to do. And if your primary and secondary education isn't up to it, it's very hard for us to fix it then. So the answer is yes.
Yeah, okay. Lee, same thing. What do you think about North Carolina?
Well, I think in North Carolina there's been significant education reform already, and in particular a significant increase in teacher pay over the last 6 or 7 years. So a teacher in North Carolina, a K through 12 teacher, now makes more than the average North Carolina salary on a 10-month contract. And there's still obviously more work to do. We need to continue to invest in our community college system, which is crucial to our competitiveness. And I think the funding formula for the UNC system, the 17 campuses of the UNC system, is under review. I don't think anybody thinks it works the way it needs to work. I'll tell you something very interesting I saw in the South Carolina proposal, which is a requirement that a rural school district below a certain number of students choose a partner with which to merge. And I'll be interested to see if that makes it into the final legislation, because that holds the promise of addressing this challenge that we have in both North and South Carolina of these small rural school districts that are subscale and need a solution.
Did North Carolina talk about doing that, finding some of the, I don't want to say underperformers, but smaller, less critical mass education schools to do that?
North Carolina has talked about that, and we've got what's interesting is there are some school districts where there are fewer kids of high school age in the entire school district than there are in some high schools in a place like here in Charlotte. And so there's this huge disparity in size of the local school districts, and some of them are too small for all kinds of things in terms of purchasing and to really be as efficient as they can. So I think what South Carolina has proposed is pretty innovative.
Peter, any thought on that?
Yeah, I would just add that I think your problem in all of these contexts is the people, that are at the top of the distribution are getting a world-class education. It's the people at the average and the people at the back of the distribution that we have to think about. And I'm delighted that South Carolina is beginning to try and focus on that in a very structured way. It's not the top people that you've got to worry about, it's the average and the ones at the back. If we can't fix those, and many of those are in rural areas, but we also have them in urban areas, and we've got to focus on the back of the distribution. So, yep, that's critical.
Okay. I wish we had more time to unpack that. Lee, I want to come back to something. And for many decades, we were focused on, when it comes to the economy, the price of oil, the price of energy. That was a major component, is a major component in generating energy for the United States and certainly the region. But it seems like now, and I don't mean to be flippant about this, but the price of a barrel of oil almost seems like it doesn't matter these days. It doesn't move markets like it did quite as much. The media doesn't fixate on the price of oil. Is that some oversight, or is the cost of a barrel of oil not as important as it used to be?
Well, I agree that the price at the pump seems to be less of a media hot button than it used to be, and I think that's maybe for two reasons. One is that prices have been relatively low on a historic basis over the last few years here, and secondly is that we generate so much more oil domestically that it's less of a global trade issue. If you think back to the wars with OPEC in the 70s, oil doesn't have that same kind of geopolitical dimension that it used to. But I think the price of energy overall is still crucial. And Governor McMaster, I've never heard him give a talk about the virtues of South Carolina without talking about the relatively low price of energy in South Carolina. It's the same thing in North Carolina. And I think sometimes people think that's kind of an old economy idea, that when you talk about the price of energy, you're talking about heavy manufacturing. But for a data center, one of the reasons that we have so many data centers in North Carolina is the relatively low price of energy. And so while the price at the pump doesn't seem to be as salient as it used to be, I think the overall price of energy is as important as ever.
Lee mentioned trade, Peter. Of course, both Carolinas are net exporters of goods and services. So this dispute that the United States has been in with China in the Pacific Rim is certainly front and center. It's interesting that, again, I don't want to be flippant, but when you talk public comments from companies that trade internationally will say, our top line, our bottom line are hurting. We've got to really think about the uncertainty around this. Private comments from a lot of these same businesses they're cheering on the disruptive nature of what these talks are representing. Is that a dichotomy? Is that hard to rationalize, those two extremes?
Yeah, I'm not sure I would agree that they're cheering it on, because the people that I have spoken with are very concerned about what tariffs or a potential tariff war would do to the infrastructure. South Carolina's got the highest per capita foreign direct investment in the country. And I see BMWs and other automobiles going down our highways, down to the port of Charleston to get out of our country. And it's critical to them. So I'm not sure I would say that there's a dichotomy. I think there's a concern that if we don't find a solution and we really start to do something bad on a trade war level, it's going to be problematic for all of us. And I think the hope is that we will find our way forward, and that through standing up and asking for some adjustments, we get reasonable adjustments in a reasonable time that don't lead to, quote unquote, a meltdown, for lack of a better phrase.
So as you said, automotives and aerospace industries go pretty deep in the Palmetto State. Yeah. Does this trade dispute peel back how much risk that South Carolina does have by having such stout industries?
Yes, it does. South Carolina's gone through a remarkable transition over the last 20 or 30 years. A lot of the textile capacity has been converted into manufacturing, and a lot of the manufacturing is export-oriented. And as a consequence of that, it's becoming very important to us that we stay open. And I mean, the deepening of the port in Charleston, the Panama Canal opening up. I mean, I'll tell you another thing. You said something to us earlier in this program about us being smack dab in the middle of South Carolina. Well, I've got
You mean USC in Columbia?
USC, yeah. I've got a better bit of news for you. The Southeast by 2040 is going to probably be the biggest consumer market in the United States. And South Carolina is smack dab in the middle of that. And we have a very good port, and we have access. We're 5 hours from Europe, so we're in a really good time zone, and we can connect with Asia. So the future of South Africa, forgive me,
It was close,
that's a bad slip. The future of South Carolina is so much dependent upon how we integrate and trade with the rest of the world. And that's the reason, I think, why you get the angst when you heard my answer to your question.
Yeah, I wish we had more time to talk about that too. Gentlemen, please stay with us. We're going to meet our guest in just a moment. Coming up on this program, John McConnell Golf. Why that might sound familiar is John has been, this is my term, cobbling together private golf courses here in the Southeast and has become the largest private investor of such courses, brand name courses. And John McConnell will be back on this program. Also, Ravi Kumar is the CEO of Triangle-based Infosys, and he will also be on this program as well. It may not hail from one of the trendiest zip codes in the Carolinas, but don't be fooled. Fortune 500 giant Sonoco carries a lot of leverage in manufacturing and international trade, as we talked about on the beginning of this program, from the modest Ph.D. region. U.S. trade uncertainties with the Pacific Rim, as well as unclear direction in the near term of broader recycling, loom large for Sunoco's planning. Joining us now is Sunoco President, Chief Executive Officer, Rob Tiede. Rob, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
And let me just, on the very beginning of this discussion, Rob, this is appropriate for us. On this program, we believe that it's important to know underwriters of this program, as Sunoco has been for a long time, do not control editorial comment. We appreciate their support, but in the full interest of full disclosure, Sunoco is an underwriter of this program. Rob, let me start with the largest thing we've been talking about, international trade. When you hear, when you see, when you watch and try to plan what your strategic direction is going to be, how do you do it with this U.S.-China trade dispute going on?
Well, you know, interesting question. I would tell you that uncertainty breeds a lot of hesitancy. And when I take a look at where we as a company want to grow around the world, clearly Asia is highly attractive. If you're going to be relevant over the next 120 years, celebrating our 120th anniversary this year, we've got to go where the people are and where the opportunities exist. And so we last year made an investment in China. And I honestly believe that the tariffs is part of the journey. It is not the destination. And that ultimately, if I take a look at business overall, and as specifically as it relates to us, the interconnectivity of supply chains is drastically different today than it was 10 years ago. And so for us, coming back to driving some certainty, there are some fundamental issues that need to be addressed, IP rights being one of them. But I think that we will come through this and get this issue resolved for the betterment of the entire global economy.
So you have a high degree of confidence that there will be some trade agreement that both sides can live with?
I absolutely believe it's in our mutual best interest to make that happen.
Peter, question?
So can I just follow up on that? And Rob, firstly, can I thank you for the tremendous support that we've got from Sonoco at the business school.
Our pleasure.
You're well aware of that. I don't have to give a disclosure that we're underwritten, but I can tell you what, it's pretty close.
Yes.
So thank you for that. As you look at the explosion of commerce in China, the question or the thing that worries me is that the 20th century was a period where low energy costs enabled us to make somewhere and transport it to somewhere else. But with energy costs probably over the next 50 years going up, globalization will probably be more replaced by regionalization. And as China stands up, I suspect it will be more by China, in China, for China.
Correct.
Does that concern you in the strategy that you're putting forward?
No, because as we've evolved around the world, what we've really done is we've put our factories into these various countries to really serve the local market. So it's not like we are producing something in China and bringing it back here. it is really geared towards serving and bringing our technology to allow that economy to grow. And so to a lesser degree, I'm concerned about what you'd propose there.
Okay.
And maybe on a related note, Rob, you're based in Hartsville, South Carolina. It's a lovely place. I've been there a time or two. It's not Charleston. It's got a different set of attractions. How does a company like Sonoco attract, retain the young professionals you need to grow your business in a less urban area?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think the way the young people work, the way we are doing work today is radically different than when I first got into the workforce, where we lined up in the row of desks and everyone showed up the same day and at the same time. I think that creating an opportunity for us, for example, we saw this trend occurring. We've opened up some offices outside of Hartsville to try to attract some of that young skill set that we need for the longevity of the company, and are creating opportunities for alternative methods of working, if that makes sense. But what I would tell you is that the young people still want to be around where the decision makers are. Mm-hmm. And so the other thing that I think that we've been able to do is create a young professional organization inside the company that really they get together. It's more than just social. It's talking about business-related issues. And I think that's created a unique community that they can come together, discuss things, and allow them to come and be very impactful in the local community. So we've been fortunate that we've had that. The other thing I would tell you in Hartsville, having Coker University there, having a governor's school there, brings kids in. And once kids have been exposed to that, some of them actually really like it and want to stay. So it's created a unique opportunity for us as well.
Let me go back to trade and uncertainty. And it's not just with China, Rob, but the idea that you spent time as a corporate leader in Europe and you're watching very uncertain times in the UK around Brexit. How much of that throws a monkey wrench into whatever strategic direction you may have?
Well, we take a look at it. I think, ultimately, a couple of different things. One, again, I think to some degree we've built a hedge around where we invest in these countries because we're really focused on the global market. I think Brexit, it does create some uncertainty in terms of what is it ultimately going to be and what will it look like. And that uncertainty sort of maybe stalls out on when you make some investments in those countries. But at the end of the day, when I take a look at it from a perspective overall and say, okay, where are the consumers? Or fundamentally, are the consumers going to behave differently? Will it create, in the Brexit situation, if they do break, will it create a recessionary environment over there a little sooner than otherwise would have occurred? Those are the things that we think about.
Do you do any modeling around a slowdown, either artificial or not, or naturally occurring, when you plan, all of our hotspots are here, we're in Europe, we're in the Pacific Rim, and oh yeah, by the way, in the U.S. it very well could happen. How do you pro forma that?
Well, at the end of the day, we build a budget every year that we all take a look at, and that's, with best assessment at that point in time. The moment it's complete, it's wrong, and you start looking at things differently. We do a rolling every 3 months where we're saying, okay, these were the assumptions that we took a look at. What has fundamentally changed? Is there enough of a shift that would alter us from taking a look and saying, something needs to be altered here in terms of the assumptions we've made, and what does that mean? And so I think that's something that inherently most of the larger business, and I'd say most businesses are really driving. It's out of necessity.
Yeah.
Can I shift the discussion just a little bit away from trade, come back to what you guys are doing in Hartsville? Barron's gave you the 48th Most Sustainable Company Award. Congratulations in 2019, and I think it's the second year you've been on that list.
Correct.
Can you just tell us what the core of your sustainability strategy is and where it's going to go from here?
Certainly. Plastics and sustainability is obviously in the news, and plastics is the great evil, and I don't think plastics is the great evil. I think Sonoco is somewhat unique. We're unique in the fact that we participate in multiple platforms. We're in the paper business, we're in the flexible packaging business, lightweight films, and we're in the polymer business. We're not in glass, but we also do dabble in metal because we make metal ends. So I'm going to say we can come at things from an agnostic standpoint and look at what is it we're trying to solve. And I think at the end of the day, you've got to take a look at the whole focus around why are we using what we're using to package the materials that we are, because it's about processing, it's about protecting, preserving, presenting, and then providing utility to us as consumers. And so as we look at it, and the way we approach things is saying, okay, what are the constraints, realistic constraints? Because blue sky solution setting isn't going to work. What are the constraints? And then what is it our customer is trying to accomplish? And then what's the best package that meets those 5 Ps that I just talked about? If I take a look at us as a company, and I'll use 2017 data just because it's fresh in my head, we shipped out 4.8 million tons of packaged product, materials that we sent out. 75% that we either recycled or caused to be recycled. So we've got a pretty good story. We've just been very quiet about it. And then what you're now hearing in the marketplace is these commitments to 100% recycling. Therein lies the biggest challenge, because in order to make that happen, we've got to find the infrastructure that allows us to capture a lot more of that material that allows us to do that. And I don't think that is going to be done over the next 4 to 5 years. It's going to be a longer term play that needs to play out. But as I think about sustainability, I'm going to shift this a little bit, and I don't mean to, but the biggest issue that we have is food waste. And this is where packaging comes in, because it's part of the solution. And so when I think about the challenges that we're facing with respect to sustainability and, more importantly, recycling, you've got 3 times more food waste going into landfills than you have packaging waste. And when it degrades into methane gas, that is 25% worse than CO2. So when we talk about sustainability, I think we've got to look at it from that whole end to end, and what is it we're trying to accomplish? To us, the way we think about this in Sunoco, we think we have got a unique opportunity to be part of a much bigger solution for a global issue, and that is hunger. And I think that our folks work very hard on a daily basis to come up with the appropriate solution to provide the package that helps preserve food and provide that to people inside different parts of the country here. I mean, if you think about the U.S., 40% of our food is wasted. You know, that's 10% of our energy budget goes into agriculture, 50% of our land, 80% of our consumable fresh water. So we've got to resolve this. And if we improve the food waste here in just the United States by 2%, we can feed all of the hungry people right here in the U.S. So I didn't mean to get us off, but it's all connected to that whole sustainability.
We've got about 2 minutes left. I'd love to, no pun intended, unpack that, but want a quick follow-up question?
You mentioned education reform in the short session here. The South Carolina legislature is also taking on tax reform. It's going to be a busy short session in Columbia. What are you looking for tax reform out of the legislature?
Well, that's a great question. You know what, my response has always been, I'll let the policymakers make policy, and then we'll figure out how we need to work within that policy. But where we can, clearly incentive to make further investment if it makes good sense for us to do it here. We were very deliberate in terms of an investment we made in our innovation center. We looked at opportunities to move that outside of South Carolina. We looked at other cities. It made the most sense for us to have not only our people together, but the equipment so that we could bring customers in and allow them to tell us what the problem is. So creating incentive to bring smart people into the state is critically important. And we talked a little bit about education. That is absolutely key, to bring smart people into the state so that their children have an opportunity for a great education. And that, I think, will just be great for the Carolinas.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. So not just smart to bring into Darlington County where you are.
I'm talking about the Carolinas.
How do you incent other of your leadership? Now, and I don't mean within the company, Rob, but how do you encourage others who are colleagues of you in other industrial sectors?
Well, I have
and we have about 30 seconds.
Yeah, I've got a small group that I get together with, some CEOs of small private companies. We talk about these types of issues and amongst ourselves over a cup of coffee. And it is about the war on talent and making sure that you've got the opportunities to create those opportunities for them. But it goes beyond the individual. It's about how do I make sure that I entice the entire family that this is the place to live. And those are the conversations that we have. And a lot of it has to do with, especially I'll call it the younger managers. It's about making sure that we know that we can provide a great education for their children. That's the driver for them in their decision making.
Thanks for being on the program, Rob. Congratulations. 30% return to shareholders since you were named CEO. Not a small thing, but I know you would defer it to other people, but still thank you.
Thank you.
Good to have you on the program. Lee, good to see you again. Thank you.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter,
Good
see you
to see you.
soon, and thanks for being on the program.
Good night.
Until next week, I'm Chris William. Have a good weekend. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review provided by Martin Marietta, Colonial Life, the Duke Endowment, Barings, Grant Thornton, Sonoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.